because we were just a neighbor and because we led with, who we want to be instead of what we want from you. This is what we want for you. How can I serve you? What's happened is it's something that's turned into a phenomenal situation to where I just go, oh my gosh, that wasn't the outcome I was looking for. It's better than the outcome I was looking for.
Welcome to the Culture-neer podcast. I'm your host today, Terry Gwaltney, and I'm excited to welcome Fred Gushue. He's the CEO of Preferred Care Home. Just a good friend. Met him along the way. Actually, our paths crossed at an organization called Windshape, and he actually wrote a leadership opinion, expert opinion in my book, The Culture-neer. And so it's super exciting for me to have him on the show all the way from Florida today. So, Fred, welcome to the show.
Well, thanks, Terry. Appreciate it. I feel the same way. Excited to be here.
Why don't you catch up our audience just a little bit on your background? I mentioned where we met. You can add a little context to that too. But wow, you've got quite a pedigree in your past and some very interesting stops along your journey. So, and to end up where you're at as a CEO, and the owner now of a healthcare company. Why don't you just talk to us and just catch us up? Tell us a little bit about your journey.
Sure. I'm going to go back a little bit, but I'll make it quick. College, Birmingham, Alabama, studying marine science, got a job at a restaurant parking cars. On my nights off, I watched the guys cook, and I fell in love with the hospitality industry. I started my career there in Birmingham. Woke up one day a couple years later and realized my parents live in Boca Raton, Florida, so I probably need to move back to Boca Raton, Florida. Packed up my house in Birmingham and moved to Boca Raton, Florida. Started with a restaurant company, and we started building restaurants all over the state. Landed in this place called the Addison on Camino Real and Dixie, which is Addison Meisner, who designed the Boca Hotel, the Cloister up in St. Simons Island, Georgia. He was a famous architect. And so we wound up getting his house, and we converted it to a restaurant. Well, on Monday nights, I was going to my church, and they had this sort of a leadership training, and really what does your faith mean? And I would go there on Monday nights after having this restaurant with my wife and I, and they kept saying, hey, we need help with our cafe in the church. And I was like sort of laughing because I was at the sort of a high-end exclusive place in Boca. And I said, yeah, I'm not going to do that. Well, as you would have it, my wife and I were like, we had young kids at the time, and I wind up going, you know what, I'm going to leave this and I'm going to start working at this little place in Fort Lauderdale called Calvary Chapel. Just watch people get their lives right. It was just phenomenal. And I got to be a part of a whole bunch of things that I was never really qualified for, but somehow, the Lord in His providence just had me be a part of at that time. And then then it came to a place where I was like, I need to go back to the corporate world. And sure enough, a friend of mine became the president of Windshape. And my wife and I were at a season where our kids, they actually grew up and had lives of their own and didn't want to hang out with us anymore, and they wound up doing their thing. And so we're like, okay, I'm going to go on a journey. And that's when I met you up at Windshape, and I was up at Windshape for about 5 years. And it was awesome. Loved my experience at Windshape. I was the director of that whole facility that you're pretty familiar with up there, Terry. And then my wife and I started having conversation. My son got married. My daughter got married. My younger son graduated with an engineering degree. My younger son sort of settled in Jupiter, Florida. My older son, who's a professional baseball player, who I'm partners with right now, bought a house in a place called Viera, Florida, which is awesome. It's just east of Orlando. And they started having children. So he has 2 boys. And then my daughter, who is married to a F-35 pilot in the Air Force, who's now deployed in Okinawa, and they didn't get hit with any tsunami last night, so we talked to him, so he's fine. But they bought some property down here in Palm Bay, Florida, waiting to, when he gets out of the Air Force, to build it up here. So my wife and I bought a retirement place, and we said, hey, instead of retiring, let's go down there and start a business, and let's sort of plan the rest of our life, because our kids are going to be there and we want to be around our grandkids. And so that's what we did. And so looking for businesses, we wound up starting a healthcare business, because my brother-in-law is a doctor, and he was sort of helping me in the process of coming up with ideas. I was a little hesitant to do restaurants or hospitality. And so talked to my son, interviewed some companies, and we said, all right, let's do it. So that's where I'm at. Being a grandpa, being an entrepreneur, being a dad, and being a husband, and trying to push a train uphill right now. There you go.
Wow. That's awesome. That's awesome. It's really cool at this stage of your life that you just wanted to go forward, start all over again. And I mean, true entrepreneurial at heart, obviously. Was there anything in your childhood that gave you any kind of a sneak peek into kind of what your destiny was? Seems like you've done a lot of different things, but they all kind of had an entrepreneurial type pioneering theme.
You know, I would say, my faith and my family really drove me. It's like, everyone says that it's like, hey, man, you're bold, you're a builder, but I don't feel that way internally all the time. I'm a little bit fearful, I'm a little bit hesitant, and it sort of takes me a while. But, I really love serving people, and I love the reason I got into the hospitality industry at first was the concept of connecting with people over breaking bread. There's a Bible verse in Acts chapter 2 that, there's a picture of breaking bread from house to house, eating your food with gladness and sincere heart. And you watch this thing happen relationally. And I just fell in love with the thought of relationships. And so I wasn't a restaurateur, and I didn't study restaurateurs. I was just I just loved watching people connect over a dinner table. I watched how my family did it, and I tried to incorporate that with my children. We would have dinner together, we'd have family night together, and that's the stuff that the most important thing to us. And so it really became an expression of just who I was. And then, going to WinShape, it was so easy because Chick-fil-A and the Cathy family are so spectacular when it comes to hospitality. They take it to the absolute next level. And so it was a great expression. But the reason I got into what I'm doing right now is really just, serving, improving the life of seniors. My dad passed away a couple of years ago, and we get to serve him, at home for a couple of years before he went to be home with the Lord. But it really made an impact on us. And it's like, as I was looking at businesses and sort of this area, we did some research and stuff. And we have about a 27% population of seniors in Brevard County, and it's only growing. And it's like, all right, well, who's serving them, And there's a whole world of seniors that it's almost hidden, and that we're sort of in the middle of. And so I hope that answers your question.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Find a need and meet it, find a hurt and heal it. That's seems like that's exactly what happened. That's awesome. You said something I thought was really interesting, and we really buy into that even, at our organization. And it's just how people connect around breaking bread. One of the things that we've done for, the last 15 or 16 years is all of our weekly meetings start with food. It's a 2-hour meeting where we celebrate wins and discuss strategy and, how do we create raving fans. But it always starts with everybody bringing a dish in and we eat. And I was just telling the guys this a couple of weeks ago, we don't do this because we feel like there's somebody here that's going to go without a meal. We don't do this because we're hungry. We do this because when people become a part of our team and this culture, you hear them describe it as, I feel like I'm a part of a family. It's kind of a brotherhood if you're a guy. And I said, you think about all the moments that you remember that are important and the conversations that were significant. They all happened around a dinner table with people that you were doing life with, people that you cared deeply about. And I think it's a critical part, I know, for us of our culture. We have to reset it sometimes, to kind of remind guys, hey, it's not about, did I bring macaroni and cheese today? Or, hey, I just, forgot it along the way. It's a much bigger purpose. and hard to measure, but I know it's interwoven into who we are as a culture, and I think you're exactly right.
I couldn't agree with you more. You know, it's I remember the smoked bologna I had when I was out there at Legacy Farms. So you know, it made
Yeah.
an impact on me.
Well,
It was
good,
awesome.
good.
It was awesome. And I think I was a vegetarian that week too. So you ruined me that week. It was awesome. But no, you're right. Breaking bread, something supernatural happens when you break bread with people, and things become clearer. You become, you know, there's vulnerability based trust because you share your life, and you know, you said it's men, you know, and I'll just speak to this, you know, men. You know, I tell people it's like, man, Jesus has got my eternity, and so I'm not really worried about eternity. I'm just trying to figure out how to get there, and I just need men and, you know, couples with my wife and I to come alongside us to be authentic, and the way that those relationships sort of, it takes time. But when you break bread and you're spending time with people at a meal, listening to their stories, asking them questions, asking them about their kids, their grandkids, their strengths, their weaknesses, what can I, you know, how can I encourage you? It just, what happens is that something supernaturally happens, and I think it's how the Lord's really intended it.
Mm. Yeah, it's super powerful. I think it's missed a lot in our organizations because it I think some people view that as, well, you know, we're already extremely pressed for time. We don't have time to implement that in our meeting, or man, I'm looking at my bottom line and that just seems to be just another an expense. And I think that kind of attitude is telling as well as to a health of an organization. If you don't see that as investment, if you don't see that as important, that should be a sign, if you're listening today, that you may need to step back and get a little bit of clarity. Your culture may not be quite as healthy as what you think it is, and you may want to dig into that and do a little bit of a polling amongst yourself and really,
You know,
kind of see the health.
It's really wise that you say that, because it's a condition of someone's heart. Culture, and culture starts from inside out. You know, we invested, you know, in just speaking to my time at the church, you know, and let me just make it clear. It's, you know, I worked at a church and it was a nonprofit, but you know, nonprofit is just it's a tax structure. It was a massive business, and it was, you know, it needed to be managed. It needed to have its own culture. We felt what you were just talking about is breaking bread with your staff or your managers, your leaders. We felt it was so important that we needed to build a restaurant there. Of course, it was for the, you know, the people, the parishioners who were attending there also, but for more importantly, it was really for staff to build relationship. And what we saw was people became more productive because of it. You know, sometimes it can be a distraction. And then also, you know, you just watch people break bread and build relationships. And what it did was, is it promoted that culture of relationship, and really focusing on the mission around the table. It wasn't just idle chatter. It was people aligning and collaborating towards what the mission statement there was, until the whole world hears, you know. And people were rallying around that in their area of competency, you know, whatever it might have been, marketing or video, or pastoral care, or the school, or outreach, or whatever division of the church you were in. People were really using that place to break bread, and the culture was really being, if you would, cultivated.
Mm. Yeah, and cultivated is such an interesting word to use, because it's exactly what you have to do with culture. You know, it's not something you can microwave. It's not something you can just set and forget. I mean, you have to constantly cultivate it. You're constantly pulling the weeds. You're constantly having to root out, you know, any kind of negativity or someone going toxic. You're having to brag on what you want. You're having to reward what you want repeated. I mean, at the end of the day, it just takes work. That, you know, I've wrote a lot and spoke a lot about this, and I had somebody asking the other day, just in the industry that we're in, and because I wrote a whole nother book on just, you know, even how to go hire a contractor. You know, so one of our companies is a service company. So aren't you concerned about, you know, kind of giving away some of your secrets to your competitors? And I said, no, absolutely not. I said, because one thing people can't steal is your culture. And quite honestly, it takes too much work. Most people are not willing to do it. So I'm not really too concerned about that.
You're spot on. It's so true. It's interesting. The best chefs in the world put their recipes online, and they go ahead and go do it. And they just sort of laugh. It's like, because they're not threatened at all, because there's so many more. There's so much more beyond just the ingredients that that make that recipe work.
So,
sure. Yep.
How would you define a strong company culture, and why do you think that's so critical or crucial for organizational success? Can you speak to our audience about that?
Mission, vision, goals, and objectives, it's really under all of that umbrella. And you just say, how would I define a company culture? It's, there's so many elements of it, but from a big picture, I can just I'm going to speak to Calvary. It was until the whole world hears. There was such clear vision. Every employee, whether you were the president of the company, the senior pastor, or you were volunteering cleaning up, poop in the kids ministry, or they called it code brown, they called it code green, they called it code yellow. So what happens is there wasn't a hierarchy. It was this whole thousands of people with a clear vision rowing in the same direction. And it wasn't exhausting. It was invigorating, so, what I would say is the vision clear? Is the vision communicated? Are people understanding the vision, and are they living the vision? And I would say that all of it takes training, and all of it takes investment. And you ask the question is, why is it so important? There's something that I learned, and it's called sideways energy. And every business has sideways energy. Every ministry has sideways energy. Every family can have sideways energy. What are the things that are not important, that are not part of our culture, or that are not part of our vision that we get distracted by? And, you can, if you look up, culture or whatever, one of them said this, it's like, no whining or complaining. I have been in organizations that all of a sudden, when that becomes, if that is introduced into the culture, I've just watched it derail, and it exhausts you. What I would tell people sometimes is that, hey, listen, all the stuff that you're complaining and whining about, when you go home, or you're telling it to your spouse, or you're telling it to your family, and if you're on salary, you're still clocked in. And so your hourly wage is going down, because what you're doing is you're taking this stuff home with you all the time, and it's exhausting you, so that when you come back to work, you're not refreshed. And it's so important to have a healthy culture for the benefit of everyone, for your employees, and then for your customers. Because if it's not, everybody feels it. And turnover rate and all that stuff. We can talk about all that stuff, but it's like, when employees are discontent, it's a disaster. It's so expensive. It's so expensive to replace employees.
Absolutely. Elaborate just a little bit on the role of leadership, because I love what you were saying there on driving and sustaining cultural change. Because it's one to drive it, and then it's something else to be able to sustain it.
It comes down to the point is what you allow. As a leader, you can either have your eyes wide open, or you can walk around with your eyes wide shut. And it comes down to, and I'm going to use this word, but it's not meant as a derogatory word or an aggressive word, but it's conflict. If you are not doing what you're supposed to do, are you going to hold yourself accountable? Because inevitably, as the leader of the organization, are you being authentic? Are you being that leader that actually believes in the vision and mission? And I would say, there's been times when I've woken up and I've been exhausted, and I haven't been thinking right, and it's like, I don't want to deal with that today. And if you let something pass, it just comes back to bite you. It's a little problem, and then all of a sudden it becomes a big one. And I would say, how do you address things that aren't right to make the changes, not knee-jerk reactions, but talk to people like they are so important, and, get them to change and give them real, hey, here's this is what you did. This is what we expect. I need you to keep doing this. I need you to stop doing this, and I need you to start doing this, and have that conversation, not out of anger or any of that stuff, but honestly to protect the culture, because you are a protector of that culture. And if people are misbehaving in that, who's going to protect all the other employees from an individual who's not believing up to? Because they're looking at you to say what you believe and do what you believe. And so I just think I just think it's so important to have those loving, truthful, gracious conversations and you don't turn a blind eye to stuff that's not aligned with your vision and values.
So good, so good. For a leader, what we allow or culture really is it's either a result of what we've allowed or it's a result of what we've taught. And I think if you truly look at culture like you were describing it, and that's the way I look at culture, when people come in, if they go through a rigid interview process and they get to the point where you're inviting them to the team, we've invited them into the family. And I think what I heard you say a while ago is that's where the leader has to step up. And if you just think about your personal family, if someone was bullying one of your kids and they couldn't handle it, you would step in. If someone misspoke to your wife and disrespected her, you would step in. If your neighbor was doing something, that was threatening you or your property or even one of your pets, you would step in. So why, as a leader, would we not view the people on our team as a family? Because that's what people miss, I think. Many times I think we don't have the conversations that we need to have, not for fear of how it makes the other person feel, out of the awkwardness of how it makes us feel. So we avoid the conversation and we allow the situation to get so bad that then we're forced to be able to deal with it. The problem is by that time, it's usually caused so much damage, and there's a ripple effect. Even after the person's gone, you're still cleaning up the mess. I think there's go ahead, but I think there's such a lesson there for leaders just to kind of man up, no pun intended, woman up, and see it for what it is. And you have a responsibility to protect your family. This just happens to be your work family.
You're spot on. It's 100%. And what happens is that sometimes people are, and the answer is why don't you do it? Fear. And fear is the opposite of faith. I have watched, there's in the book I talked about a guy that I worked for who he became my overseer, and I never knew him and I never met him until I went to Calvary. But it was, the best person I've ever worked for, and he now has become a phenomenal family friend, and I serve on boards with him and all that kind of stuff. But he, anytime I would have a conversation with that person, he would go have lunch with him. And I'm like, I just want to fire them. He goes, nope, just go have lunch with him. And you've got to, and I'm like, are you crazy? And the answer is he was crazy, but he was spot on. And I can just think, and a lot of those conversations, there's a saying, seeking to understand. And, a lot of times we don't have clarity. So as a danger, and I think a culture sort of buster is, making decisions without having complete information. And so what I've tried to do is he made me seek to understand what was happening. What was the question behind the question? What's the motivation of that, behavior? Where's that coming from? And I can remember having lots of conversations with people who weren't, they were culture busters. And all of a sudden, some of the conversations that I had with people that we were really about to let go, it was, hey, I was able to make some changes. We were able to make some changes, and they had legitimate stuff, and I learned as a leader. And then other people, we were right, and we go, nope, they need to move on, and we moved them on. But how we did it was a way that was honoring to them, and it was the best case scenario for both, instead of just having this guillotine type of approach to something. But seeking to understand is so important, because I think what happens is that it creates the culture of safety for your employees, that they can get a fair shot and they get listened, they do have a voice. And sometimes the results are, hey, we've decided to part ways. Or as a leader, you sit with someone and you learn something you didn't know, because you don't know what you don't know. And you can learn tremendously from having those sit downs. So Mark Davis made me do that all the time. And honestly, it helped me so much on my journey.
Sounds like wise wisdom. I think the natural tendency for leaders is we seek to be heard instead of seeking to understand. I think as we mature and we get a little older,
oh, it's so true.
Then we seek to understand, and usually it's because there's a lot of bodies in the wake, and there's a lot of scars on learning from what we did wrong. But we take the same approach. I think I know I'll just speak for men. It's husbands. I think if we're not careful, we take the same approach. With our spouses. We're there. Our eyes are locked. We say we're listening, but if you get in what I would call a heated moment of fellowship, you're not really listening to what is being said. You're waiting for a pause so you can get your point across to prove how right you are. And I think that's a very, very poor leadership principle, though, to try to practice, because as we know, we're modeling the example of how we want everybody else, that we're trying to train up and build up our leadership bench to, react, respond. And you're right, that doesn't build trust, safety, and confidence in that environment.
Yeah, you're exactly right. Yeah, just listening to respond is so dangerous, because it really it just tells the other person, whether it's your wife, whether it's an employee, whether it's your children, you're not important, and what you say is not important. But if you can listen to understand, there's a and I don't know where this came from, but I'll just say it. It's like being heard is so closely related to feeling loved that most people don't know the difference.
Oh, that's good.
You don't have to solve all the problems, but as a leader, just being a place that someone can be heard, really, when someone talks out loud and they hear themselves speak, they can solve their own problem.
Talk to the audience just real quick, because we have all spectrums listening today. How can companies use their culture as a competitive advantage? Because without doubt, we have some listening today, and it's like, that sounds good, but my company is not that big. We're not that profitable. I know it's important, but there's 10 other things that are more important. Talk to that group of people today on how their culture can be that competitive advantage. You've seen it. You're probably experiencing it today. WinShape, I think, was a result of Chick-fil-A's, historic win in that whole arena.
Yeah. It's funny that you asked me that question, because I think I'm living it right now. Because let me put it in perspective. I said in the beginning, we're pushing a train uphill, and most of my career, I've built things that created lots of resources for a lot of people, and I had a lot of people pushing me uphill. Now my son and I are pushing uphill, so we have sales and we are profitable, but man, it's not anywhere close to what we're used to. And so you go, culture. How does it use it my competitive advantage? And I would say this, and I'm just going to use Jesus for a minute because he's my favorite example. The Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and give his life as ransom for many. There are so many competitors in my field in the healthcare industry. And even when I say healthcare industry, it conjures up, ideas and thoughts in people's mind. Well, imagine if our culture is to serve. Our culture is to protect the seniors' dignity and independence and improve their quality of life. Well, I'll give you an example. And this is specifically related to your question about how important culture is when you have all this other stuff going on. How can I use it as a competitive advantage? I have minimums in our business because it's like anything below that, it's just not worth the time. Well, I got a phone call one day, and this was probably 6 or 7 months ago from someone up in Virginia, and it was from a military installation up there, and he had called someone and got my number, and I just said, hey, let me help you, you know. And this had nothing to do with profitability, but I could just tell he had his mom and dad down near me. He was somewhere else, but he was trying to figure out care for them. Anyway, none of it was profitable, and it's not really in the framework of what we're doing. But anyway, I said, here, I would do A, B, C, and D, and we helped them and we served them. And all of a sudden, that was that, and the conversation sort of came to an end. But he wound up calling me back, and he said, hey, listen, we have this long-term insurance. Can you help me? Yes. I went and met with his mom. I went and met with his dad. And really just to be a neighbor, if you would. They live a couple buildings down from me. Anyway, we wound up getting this case. And the case was one day, couple hours a week. Well, let me tell you something. This guy went on to be an admiral. He got promoted to admiral. And his mom and dad just needed a neighbor to just sort of help. So the mom comes to my office every couple of weeks, and she shares me her bills, and this is what's going on. And we wound up being it's been such a great relationship. And then as a result of that, she writes an article about us, or a Google review about us, and it's been phenomenal. It's been received phenomenally. And you just go, and so she winds up taking business cards in our flat, in her condominium. And so what started out as it's been nothing. When I'm telling you, it was like more of an aggravation. But part of our culture is we want to serve the senior community in our area. We want to make a difference in our community. So if there wasn't any money in it for us, but here's what happened is because we were just a neighbor, and because we led with, who we want to be instead of what we want from you. This is what we want for you. How can I serve you? What's happened is it's something that's turned into a phenomenal situation to where I just go, oh my gosh, that wasn't the outcome I was looking for. It's better than the outcome I was looking for. But really, it's the culture of wanting to serve instead of to be served, to be a giver rather than a taker. All of a sudden, people start hearing about businesses like that. They can't wait to sign up with you. It's not like there's a lot of them out there like that.
Right.
And so if your culture has that kind of integrity and that kind of real genuine desire to serve, it becomes infectious, and you become the standard bearer, if you will, and not trying to. It's just being who you are.
It's almost like turning on a flashlight in a dark room. It doesn't matter how big the room is or how dark it is. All the attention goes to the little flashlight that begins to pierce through the darkness. 100%. I love what you said. It wasn't about what you did or what you could get from them. It's what you could do for them. That's a powerful statement. We talk about it in the sales world. It's like, listen, this is what makes you different. In most sales, it's what can you do to the customer. And we try to train our guys. This is what you can do for them. It's totally different approach. It's slightly different. But, one is about serving, and it's really about them. You just happen to benefit by helping them. The other is about what you can extract from them with no real value in, the relationship. So, again, I think it comes back to culture. It comes back to heart. And I think what you described was servant leadership. And so powerful. Give some advice to the next generation of leaders on building and nurturing a culture. What would you tell them?
What would I tell them? When I see this next generation, relationship is very different for them because they have social media. They have, a lot of times the next generation is really head down, buried in a phone, communicating via text, and some of that is beneficial. But what I'm learning is I'm working with a next gen. I'm working with a 29-year-old on a daily basis. And what's happening is he's getting, there's head down work and there's head up work. When he lifts his head up and really, we're going to the Chamber of Commerce, and all of a sudden he's engaging with people. He's talking to people. He's having face-to-face conversations. Communication is so important, and a text is impersonal and email is impersonal. Fake advertising on social media is impersonal, but what's non-impersonal is actually shaking a hand and looking at someone in the eye and being able to discern and learn nonverbal communication and be able to read a room and be able to see who needs help and to ask the right questions. And so I would just say to the next generation to engage. Get yourself out of your comfort zone. Get your head up. Engage with people. Look them in the eye. Have conversations. And when you're marketing, and I'm going to use that word marketing, but it's not marketing. It's I don't have anything to sell. Either people have a budget for this and they want this, or they don't. And so if it works out, that's great. But the bottom line is that if you're out there to see how you can serve someone else and engage that, then what's going to happen is it's going to pay dividends. John McInturf, and John McInturf and I worked together at Windshape for a while, and he was the head of our marketing or sales department. And it's so funny. We were like, we're not selling anything. We're just going to make friends. And you're either seeing you're seeing old friends or you're making new friends. But the question is how can I serve you? 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 And it's disingenuous sometimes on social media and technology. And even with AI, I don't know about you, Terry, but I'm getting bombarded with AI stuff. But it's people acting like my friends that are AI bots that are generating these, and they know stuff about me. And I'm getting the emails and it sounds like they're my friend. But there is a genuine need for face-to-face relationship. And if that's a part of your culture of your business, you will stand so far above everybody else, and you'll really be a part of your community. It's not what you can get from your community, but what you can give to your community. And as a result of that, the profits and the revenue streams come.
So true. Listen, think about this for just a minute. What was the biggest aha moment you had in your career?
The biggest aha moment, what?
That you had in your career. What was that?
My life was not my own. I was bought with a price, and I was miserable when I was taking. I was full of joy and content when I was giving, and and it really, here's how it turned out. When Mark Davis invested in me, I worked for a lot of people. As a matter of fact, I worked for multiple billionaires, and they, I was like this, I don't know, like a thoroughbred that people would just, get the most out of, and they exhausted me and all that stuff. And, they paid me and did all that stuff. But when I started working for Mark Davis, he didn't want anything from me. He wanted stuff for me. And as a result of that, 2 Timothy 2:2, what you've heard me say in the presence of many witnesses, and trust the faithful men or women to do the work of the ministry. And so there's this moment of discipling people is the most important thing that I do. And the question is that, am I right with the Lord? Am I doing the things that I need to do personally in my own private life so that therefore I can be a blessing and benefit to other people? And as a result of that, there was investing in people. I don't think there's anything greater than investing in people and the fruit that happens as a result of that, whether it's your children, whether it's your grandchildren, whether it's your employees. My goal, like my prayer for my business is, God, don't give me a business. My prayer is, Father, I hung this LLC sign up here, and I said that I have a business and I want to employ people. I want to be able to give people jobs. I want to be able to develop them. I want to be able to train them and give them competency that they can make a living and invest in their family. And so really that was the aha moment that I realized my life's not about myself, but it's really about how you build and develop others. And I think that's what everyone's looking for. I mean, Terry, if I ask you to go back to that, there's a person or a place or a time of someone who invested in you that made all the difference. Investing in people are so desperate for it. They're desperate for it.
Absolutely. I think especially probably in the society which you live in with so many broken homes and a lot of times there's not that parental role where somebody's telling them, I believe in you. Here's the blessing. You can do this. I'm proud of you. Some people are spending their entire career searching for that because they never got it from the person that really meant the most to them. So,
100%.
And as a leader, if we can step in and kind of fulfill that role, it's like pouring gas on the fire and just watching them begin to burn. It's pretty awesome. When I set out to write the book, The Culture-neer, one of the things that I was the most amazed about is there was so much written on the topic of culture, yet I felt like so little truly understood. But when it come time to come up with a title, every conceivable title that I could imagine had been taken. Every good idea I found out was not an original idea to me. And so we ended up having to create a word, which was Culture-neer, to come up with a title. So it didn't exist before, so we were able to write our own definition. I say all that to ask you this. What does it mean to you to be a Culture-neer? Because that word really kind of came out of the thought process of culture and pioneer.
Well, let me give you my opinion about why there's so many culture books, and I think you can have so many more. And here's why: is because there's diversity is a big buzzword, here over the last couple of years. And I think God in his wisdom has created the ultimate diversity in the human race because all of us share a different DNA. Every DNA is different and it's unique. And culture, for you, God's put culture on your heart and he's made you've been made in his image. And he put that on your heart and to be a culture builder and a pioneer. And here's what happens is each one of us does that. Even from our Constitution, it's life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And I think why there's so many is because everyone's living their dream and they're trying to communicate all of that stuff. And what does it mean to me? It's like, I want to leave a legacy. I want to leave a legacy in order to, if you have a business, you get to leave a legacy. You get to be defined by how you treat people. Let your yes be yes and no be no. Did you invest in people and give them opportunity to get to the next level? I don't know if there's anything greater. Being employed is awesome. My dad was the best employee in the world. And every time he ventured out and do his business, it just didn't work out for him. But the bottom line is that you get to do this and you get to live a vision and get to, if you do even the mathematics of how we've gotten to this earth and the mere fact that there's X amount of people, we get to do life on this side of eternity with people. And we get to have a business that employs people, that blesses people's families and generationally has an impact. Oh my gosh, it's just absolutely incredible. And the reputation and the legacy that you want to leave as a person is directly correlated to the culture that you build, because the culture is really an expression of who you are and how you're made and how you're designed. And actually being authentic and true to that and holding people accountable to that.
Man, you said a whole lot right there. Wish we had time to.
I did.
I wish we had time to unpack all that, but you almost answered that. But I want to go directly to it. How does Fred Gushue want to be remembered when his life is over here on earth?
Say that one more time.
How does Fred want to be remembered when his life is over here on the earth? Or maybe answer it this way: what kind of mark do you want to leave that can't be erased?
Oh man, when people remember me, I want to be remembered by I love them, I encourage them, and I extended a whole bunch of grace, and that they know that they were loved by me. My kids, my dad. It's funny. My dad, when he passed away, I said he loved me and he was ridiculously generous. I would say, and that's what I said at his funeral. And I would say, I want my kids to say, and the employees to say, and whoever has come in contact with me, that Fred loved me and he was ridiculously generous.
Wow, what a legacy to live up to. Listen, I think we're going to land this right here. I predict this will be one of the most downloaded episodes. You had 4 or 5 kind of one-liners in there that were head scratchers that just, man, you could just ponder and chew on that and almost go have an entire seminar on some of the stuff that you were, saying in there. It's just, man, it's been a joy to have you on the show today. A real pleasure.
Terry, thank you so much for even considering calling me. I'm just grateful. Thank you for including me. It's an encouragement to me.
Well, you've been an encouragement definitely to our listeners. Fun fact, I have a lot of regional listeners here today, and I thought this was, correct me if I'm wrong, but you were a chaplain at one time also for the St. Louis Cardinals. Was that correct?
I was for actually, and the Washington Nationals. Yep.
And the Washington Nationals. And didn't your son play for the Chicago Cubs?
He did. He played for the Pittsburgh Pirates, the Washington Nationals, and Chicago Cubs. Yep.
So the irony will not be lost on our audience here regionally anyway, that a Cub and a Cardinal fan, father, son, now in business, and they're making culture work. Is there a bigger miracle? I don't know.
I don't know. There probably is.
But I appreciate you being on the show today. Listen, guys, remember, culture is only healthy as the leader, and we'll see you next time on the Culture-neer podcast. Terry Gwaltney from the Culture-neer podcast. Listen, I want to say thank you for listening to the podcast today. Also want to encourage you to help us get the message out to more people. If you could like, share, and review this content on wherever you consume it, if you go into YouTube or LinkedIn or just whatever your social media channels are, and you could even share it, that would be a big help to us here at the Culture-neer podcast. Also, if you'd like some more information, you can go to www.terrygwaltney.com, where we have updates. We also have more resources. We share articles there. And you also can find our new book there called The Culture-neer. Again, we want to thank you again for taking time just to listen to the podcast or view it on YouTube. It's our goal to spend 20 or 30 minutes each time we're together to help grow your culture to a point where your employees refuse to leave and your customers can't resist. This is Terry. We'll talk to you soon.